Russians tactically retreated from an undisclosed location in the east. And I mean, how much more proof you need that Russians actually retreated when they call this a tactical retreat? At the same time, the leader of Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin, claims that Russians legally took Bakhmut, and as a result of this they established a pretty big base on one of the factory buildings in the factory Azom. And then the very next day, this entire factory and temporarily military base of Russians has been not legally, but physically destroyed. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent footage. And today we begin with this ridiculous one, which is either a Spider Lenin or a Lenin Man, or just a Spider-Man Lenin, however you wanna call it. And if you think about it, what could be the special abilities of this superhero? Probably this will be to collect equally money from everyone, and it doesn't matter if you make 10,000 rubles or 1 million rubles, you will still be collected 10,000 rubles for the greater good of the nation. And then to equally distribute this money among those closest to the power. Oh, it sounds like I'm reciting communism, but I mean, that's the superhero about, right? but okay. Now please allow me a couple more words about the event. You probably heard about the elimination of one of the main military correspondents of Russia, Vladimir Tatarsky. So, long story short, this past weekend this guy had a meeting in one of the cafes in St. Petersburg, and basically a woman brought a statue of him, and there was some surprise inside. And well, fast forward to today, allegedly this woman has been caught by the brave FSB, which they claim that they knew everything in advance about that this event is going to happen. So my question is, why wouldn't they prevent it then? During their investigation, the FSB was also able to establish that one of the people working for Alexei Navalny, the main opposition person in Russia who is currently in prison, was also related to this event with Vladimir Tatarsky. And I mean, how much more suspicious it can get? The elimination of the war correspondent of Russia, and the Russians immediately blame obviously Ukrainians and the main opposition party of Russia. Then we have the statement by already familiar Dmitry Medvedev, who is saying that if you or anyone you know receive money from Ukraine to do such events in the future, you are allowed, you are responsible, you should notify the FSB about that you're going to do it. And I mean, what are the odds that people will actually do it? But anyways, because then we have the statement by the Institute for the Study of War, which claims that this might have been the result of the disagreements between the Ministry of Defense of Russia and the private military company called Wagner, which belongs to Prigozhin. Because this cafe, when this happened, it does belong to Prigozhin. Which basically means that the confrontations between Wagner and the regular Russian army are once again on the rise. And in confirmation to this, Yevgeny Prigozhin made once again a statement that he personally does not think that Ukraine and Kiev politicians are responsible for this event in St. Petersburg. And speaking about Prigozhin, recently he shared this picture of the Russian flag, which he installed allegedly in Bakhmut, claiming that they legally took the city, and this flag was dedicated to this military correspondent Vladimir Tatarsky. But don't worry, we will talk a little bit more in details about the situation in Bakhmut very soon. Because first of all, before I forget, I want to share with you this picture, which is basically the location of Putin's extremely secret residency, located in Krasnaya Polyana in Krasnodarsky Krai. And recently, we received even more leaked pictures that this place now have an extremely advanced air defense system called Pantsir S-1. So pretty much yes, Putin claims that everything should go towards victory. The whole nation itself should unite around a strong leader and work towards a common goal. And then he uses the most advanced air defense system to protect his place, where most likely he does not even show up, while the Russians on the front lines, they're using the equipment of the Second World War. And pretty much, yes, as you can see, you and hundreds of thousands of other people, now you know where this super secret residency of Putin is located. So I mean, who knows which other interesting facts you might discover in one of my future videos, but in order for you not to miss them, can you please consider at least liking this video and subscribing to my channel, so it'll be right here when it goes live. You can also check my second channel, The Russian Dude Clips, where I post under 1-minute summaries every single day. The link will be down below. And so yes, since we already touched the rapidly degrading situation for Russians in the front lines as a result of this war, let's take a look at some more consequences that Russia is suffering after the invasion. And in this first picture, you can see just how rapidly the budget of Russia declined in just first quarter alone of 2023. And then right here, we have a picture from Yevpatoria, Crimea, which shows that Russians are towing T-12 anti-tank gun. And guess what? It has been employed by the Russian army back in 1953. I mean, I'm guessing even at that time, this probably has not been the most advanced piece of technology. But now imagine this thing being against Challenger 2s and Leopard 2 tanks, just for example. But wait, there is more. If you remember from one of my previous videos, Russian propagandists made this ridiculously fake video where Ukrainian soldiers stopped a car with the woman and a kid inside and they started threatening them. And so, long story short, this video went pretty viral among Russian Z patriots, so the Russian propagandists decided to do a sequel. And so right here we have a video where once again Ukrainian soldiers, they stop a civilian car and they start arguing, but this time the drivers inside the civilian car are Polish people. And so yes, whenever Russia is busy producing fake videos and I would say militarizing its museum exhibitions, Ukrainian people and the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, are actually busy winning in this war and keeping the morale of the nation. And so right here, unfortunately, we have a picture of one of these chambers, which was located in Yehidne school, where Russians, whenever they were controlling this village, they kept the civilians there and they were taking information out of them, using the methods you can only imagine. And so in one of his most recent statements, President Zelensky said that he wishes it will be Putin himself who will spend the rest of his days in such one of his basements with the bucket instead of toilet. And after that, President Zelensky arrived to Chernihiv to award the mayor of this city the status of a hero city of Ukraine. And recently, United 24, the charitable initiative created by President Zelensky, released this almost 4 minutes video, which talks about how Ukrainians were able to stall the invasion of Russians, this fast blitzkrieg which they tried to do in the first several days, how Ukrainians were able to completely stall this just on the second day. The video is in English and it talks about which sacrifices Ukrainians had to make in order to make this happen. And so I uploaded the entire version of this video for free on my Patreon and the link will be down below. Alright, in several seconds we will talk about the potentially upcoming brand new Goodwill Gesture by Russians, and can you guess where do you think they're gonna do it this time? But first of all, just a couple more words about the Western military support to Ukraine. And first of all, in this video we can see the Polish armored personnel carrier called Rosamak in action, and recently Ukraine has placed an order for 100 units of this APC. Next we have one of the very first video of Ukrainians using American demining device M58 MiG-Leak. And ultimately, in this video we can see how Ukrainians intercept one of Russian Shahid drones. All the full uncensored versions with sounds will be available on my Patreon as well, and the link is also down below. Alright, and now as promised, let's talk about the situation in the south. And recently, according to the intelligence data presented to us by the General Staff of Ukraine, they were able to find some lists full of items and names which Russian occupiers are planning to take away from Skadovsk, relocate further to Armyansk, and then go to the south. And so, as you can see, even though the majority of combat activities are happening right now in the east of Ukraine, we did have several reports that Ukrainian partisans and diversion groups were relatively successful on the other side of Dnipro River, which potentially means that in the near future we might see that Russians will Goodwill Gesture this part of Kherson. And speaking about Crimea, recently the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Alexei Danilov, he presented his plan of peninsula deoccupation. And besides sharing with us this picture of a Ukrainian soldier who is arriving to Crimean Peninsula by water, he also said that the Crimean bridge will be completely deinstalled. All those Russians arrived after 2014 will be considered illegal. Sevastopol will be renamed, and all the other documents which were signed in these last 8-9 years will also be considered illegal. Then let's go to another major city already in Zaporozhye region, Melitopol, where recently, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainians did another successful HIMARS attack against the railroad depot inside the city. And in addition to that, Ukrainian partisans eliminated the car of a Russian collaborator, Maxim Zubarev, in Melitopol as well. Then we go to Dorozhnyanka, where recently, according to Ukrainian sources, they were able to destroy a Russian firing position located inside the city. And ultimately, if we take a look at this map, which shows us the changes in territorial control, we can see that Russians were able to advance a little bit to the east of Vuhledar. And now it's time to talk about this tactical retreat of Russians from an unspecified location somewhere in the east. But first of all, so it all makes sense, here is your overall update from the east. And first of all, according to Ukrainian sources, they were able to destroy a unique self-propelled mortar system of Russians called Tulipan, located in Tavilzhanka. Then we have the report by the Institute for the Study of War, which claims that Russians continued their offensive along Svatove-Kreminna front line with pretty much no success, but according to Russians, they were able to do a marginal gains around Kreminna. Next we go to Konstantinivka, and as you can see from this picture, as a result of one of Russian attacks, a civilian building has been severely damaged. And ultimately we go to Bakhmut itself, and right here you can see how the situation around this city has been changing in the last 48 hours. And according to this extremely questionable, suspicious and very untrustworthy video presented to us by Yevgeny Prigozhin, which apparently was recorded using, I guess, binoculars, he basically claims that Russia has already legally seized Bakhmut. But the very next day, we received a video from one of Ukrainian soldiers who is currently defending Bakhmut and is inside the city. And yeah, let's be honest, the video is of much higher quality. And the guy is saying that Bakhmut still stands, Ukrainians are not retreating, the fighting continues and defense still stands. In addition to that, a couple of days ago, Russians claimed that they were able to fully capture the territory of Azom factory, which they later turned in one of their biggest temporarily military bases. But guess what? Because Russians could not contain their emotions, and as soon as they're kinda capturing and relatively successful somewhere, especially in Bakhmut, they obviously immediately started forcing this propaganda among their Telegram and media channels. And so Ukrainians were able to confirm the fact that yes, a big portion of Russian forces is currently concentrated inside this factory. So what they did? They sent a .U missile, destroyed a big part of this factory, eliminating a big portion of Russian forces. Now let's get back to the east of Ukraine, and as you can see from this map, Ukrainians were able to take a small part of the land to the south of Kurdyumivka. And as we get closer to another major city in the east, Avdiivka, we can see how the front line has been changing in the last 48 hours. and pretty much the same stuff, the advancement of Russians is not that significant. But on the other hand, Ukrainians reportedly were able to destroy a concentration of Russian forces along with their firing position to the southwest of Avdiivka. But the most interesting and intriguing part of the recent days is that Russians reportedly tactically retreated from an undisclosed location in Donetsk region. The exact location is obviously undisclosed, but it would be my own personal assumption that Russians went further away from Kurdyumivka front line and they most likely arrived closer to Verkhno-Toretsk. Because according to Ukrainian intelligence, they saw the increase of Russian forces exactly in this city recently, and they also brought a lot of military equipment with them, which most likely means they'll be used in the further attack from the north of Avdiivka. But nevertheless, this obviously does not mean that Russians will be successful in this city, because after all, in the entire month of its great offensive in the east, specifically against Bakhmut, Russians lost approximately 24,000 of its soldiers, which is the absolute record since the beginning of this war, and they were only able to capture a maximum of 5 to 6 kilometers of Bakhmut front line. Right here, for example, you can see the comparison of the occupied territories between the beginning of March and beginning of April, and as you can see, the difference is not that big. And besides losing tens of thousands of soldiers, Russians also started bringing their prehistoric museum exhibitions / military equipment, which only further confirms the total degradation of the Russian army. And so yes, at this point, without a doubt, the counteroffensive of Ukraine is most certainly coming, and most likely it will happen in the next several weeks. And if you don't want to miss any of these events as soon as they start happening, just please consider subscribing to my channel. It only takes one click. And if you want to support my work financially, please consider becoming my channel member with a PayPal link or become my Patreon, where still 1 week of free access. You can find all these links to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.